Star Trek Picard saw the heroic introduction of a new class of vessel designed to recapture the old flair and style of a Starfleet in the heyday of exploration. That starship even bore the name of an older class of vessel, the Constitution Mark III. While I was waiting for more information to come out in regards to this vessel, I feel enough time has passed to build a pretty solid picture of it, and if new information becomes available, then I'll just make an updated video. In real life, the vessel was based on the Shangri-La class created by Bill Krause. This was not a canonical vessel at the time, but the design was a popular one with a more battle-orientated torpedo-launching ship with a Constitution look in the late 23rd century style. The design was then evolved to have Picard-era elements thrown in and later refined into the overall Titan A that would feature as the hero ship of Picard Season 3. Its origin as a design from the 23rd century, however, would mean that even with its 25th century glow-up, it retained many elements, such as a saucer shape and phaser banks. The Shangri-La class received a nod and canonising itself as the USS Titan NCC-1701 of 2290 under the command of Captain Savick. With the look of the Neo Connie being so heavily inspired by a 2290s era design, this was folded into the lore of the in-universe backstory of the class, with it being a conscious choice. So, the Mark III refers to the radical redesign of the vessel with the original Constitution, despite its variations and refits, being the Mark I. The Mark II being the major overhaul to keep the line up to date with the 2280s technology, and this being a whole new revived class. The naming convention is true both behind the scenes and in universe, with the term Neo-Constitution being thrown around to describe it. The first of the line was not the USS Constitution, but appears to be the USS Titan NCC-8102-A under the oversight of Captain Liam Shaw. Now, this Constitution class was termed a refit and a new vessel both, leading to some confusion. The Lunar class USS Titan was decommissioned in 2398 or 96, but it was stripped of its parts. This, along with many other components sourced from elsewhere, went into the frame of the Constitution Mark III, which was christened the USS Titan, the first of the name with a retained registry too. The level of reused material was enough for it to be classified as a refit, including the computer core and much of the warp assembly, and the reasoning for this was simply that Starfleet was still compensating for the loss of Utopia Planitia. Unreplicatable materials, such as warp coils, were no longer as easy to access. The refit program took place between 98 and 2401, with the USS Titan undergoing its shakedown cruise late that year, the events covered by Star Trek Picard's Season 3. The Neo Connie was created to call back to a time before the Federation had been rocked by the decades of strife and war. Starfleet had ended the century commissioning vessels like the Inquiry class, which was basically a battleship and was making an effort to dial back its aggression. This class was designed to be an exploratory craft first and foremost, and not as heavily armed as possible. However, that does not mean it was defenceless. Its shielding was multiphasic, like the Sagan class, and capable of weathering a wider array of effects because of this, and it was very fast, both at warp and more importantly at sublight speeds. This was owed to the massive impulse engines across its back. The vessel was 560.5 metres long, which makes it approximately 255 metres wide and 94 metres tall. It had 28 decks and a standard crew capacity of 500 personnel, but could operate with far fewer thanks to the addition of much automation within the late 24th century starships, part of their 6th generation technology. Its maximum warp speed was 9.99, and could cruise at high velocities for long periods, although its limits were not revealed in the show, but considering hitting this maximum warp factor was an easily achievable feat that did not even require the crew to make ready, well, chances are that this ship is extremely consistent. I've already alluded to the need for higher warp speeds in exploration ships, as they need to push further out into the receding border of the unknown. However, what was unusual about this class were the 6 impulse engines, 4 dedicated to thrust and 2 for manoeuvring, with additional impulse reactors. This gave it incredibly high sublight speeds and a high turn rate for its scale. When launched, the Titan was the fastest warp ship and had the best impulse to size ratio. The purpose of this was effectively to allow it to outmaneuver enemy ships, or outrun if needed, as well as providing greater flexibility in navigating hazards such as busy solar systems or asteroid fields. No news if it was quantum slipstream enabled. In terms of armaments, it had 18 phaser arrays and 2 torpedo launchers, 1 fore and 1 aft. 4 of these phaser arrays were the more modern strips for coverage, while the rest were the turret banks located around the saucer and hull. The ship itself was not the most powerful vessel of the era, that was the Inquiry class, but it could at least hold its own, or failing that, outfly most other vessels of its scale. Its saucer section maintained a sensor dome rather than a captain's yacht, and it had a large shuttle bay akin to the Constitution's that inspired it, although bigger. It also has multiple visible sensor bands on prominent show alongside its phasers, reflecting the priorities of the vessel. Overall, the Neo-Constitution class was created to call back to an era of exploration before Starfleet had to arm its every vessel with planet-leveling weaponry. It's a statement from Starfleet that they're finally moving on from their post-Dominion War traumas and getting back to exploring the stars. However, there's nothing to suggest that the class could not be granted higher yield weaponry if it was needed, but that was not its focus. Plus, being lightly armoured has its advantages. Think of all the foreign powers that would object to a warship rocking up in orbit to negotiate with them upon first contact, or the simple fact of allowing a heavily armoured cruiser into your borders. The Galaxy and Sovereign class, for example, were not subtle and made waves wherever they went. The Neo-Constitution? Not so much. With the Titan A proving itself in the series and being recommissioned as the Enterprise NCC-1701-G by the end, the Constitution Mark III line looks to have secured its place in the Federation fleet, and no doubt more will follow. Perhaps they too will be constructed from recycled parts, but I expect that with the Federation recovering at last, they could be built to new specifications, and the Enterprise G retrofit further to keep it up to spec. Thanks for watching this brief video on the Constitution Mark III class. I'm going to continue on the lookout for more information on it, so hopefully we will see. I've been Rick, thanks again, and until the next video, goodbye.